right, today's Daily Ticker on a Monday brought to you by Pelican Brewing Company. This year, give Santa what he wants. Forget the milk. Pair his cookies with the Northwest's favorite festive beer, Bad Santa Cascadian Dark Ale. You know who else was born at the beach? Our next guest, whose prom was at Pelican Brewing and has long been angling for an honorary spot in the original pub's Mug Club. Joining us now is our friend, the columnist at the Oregonian, Bill Oram.
Also wrote that intro for himself yesterday.
He did. I like that. We need to have guests do that more often. It sounds way better when they write it out than when I try and come up with something. He is a writer. This is what he gets paid to do, and he does it for the Oregonian at Bill Oram on Twitter. Good morning. How was your prom night, Bill? Was it a successful prom night, a fun prom night? Take me back to that year.
First of all, I'm going to need you to do that again from the top with a little more conviction this time.
And take two.
I don't know how you want to define a successful prom night, but as I think I wrote in a column a few weeks ago, I did have to basically crowdsource finding a prom date where I walked into my senior government class after being rejected a few times and just said, does anyone want to go to prom with me? I did end up having a date. It's one of the saddest, most pitiful stories I could possibly tell, but I've learned that if you just lean into the pain, it doesn't hurt as bad.
Did the night end quicker on top of the dune next to Pelican?
Can you repeat that question slowly so I make sure I don't answer it the wrong thing?
No, I think you know what I was asking.
Oh, I love it. Prom night memories are great. Oregon goes undefeated, Bill, and it's a weird year in college football where not surprised, but also surprised at the same time because of what we've seen from around the rest of the sport. What did you make of Lanning getting his first Husky pelt on the wall Saturday at Autzen?
I mean, I think all these steps are really meaningful as the Ducks are kind of on this journey, where, obviously staying undefeated is the biggest thing, but, the Ducks could have lost to Washington and gone and beaten Penn State next week and still had, the first round bye in the playoff and would have functionally changed nothing. But they continue to build momentum, experience. I think getting the monkey off, off the back, for the Ducks was meaningful and important for Dan Lanning. I thought, the way Tez Johnson talked about Washington certainly gave a little bit of insight into how Oregon has been carrying around not just the two losses last year, but the loss back in 2022 when Bo Nix got hurt. I think that from a motivation standpoint and a preparation standpoint, the Ducks came to play, and that I think just bodes well for kind of their mindset going forward, because this is a game where, again, everything was sort of already secured. Washington's coming in with nothing to lose. You're coming off a bye. There's a world where you could sort of take your eye off the prize a little bit, and we just have not seen that from the Ducks in any situation, maybe with the exception of the Idaho game to start the season when this team was still coming together. That might be the only time you'd say that this team wasn't focused and 100% prepared for the challenge in front of them.
Yeah, even the games where the offense struggles, Wisconsin, red zone with UCLA, whatnot, the defense is still kind of the constant for them. And so they are almost always in it because of that group. Penn State is the Big Ten title game opponent. We talked about this a little earlier on the show. We're excited for it just because I don't want to watch Ohio State anymore. They don't deserve to be there. I don't want to watch that. That first game was really good, but, they kind of played their way out. We haven't seen Penn State, Oregon. It kind of symbolizes something about where Oregon has gone since they played in the Rose Bowl all those years ago. Where are you at on the matchup? It kind of feels like there's a pretty lean Oregon in terms of what we've seen from Penn State, where the strengths are of their team and what Oregon's strengths are. Where's Bill Oram on Penn State, Oregon?
I mean, I was so locked in on Oregon, Ohio State, I think like everybody else was, that I appreciate the curveball, like you're describing, Brandon. It does feel like an unexpected matchup. And so much of this season has felt kind of predictable. Once you realize the march the Ducks were on, once they beat Ohio State, there hasn't been a lot of intrigue to this season. I mean, sure, Michigan, Wisconsin, those road trips were fun, and those were cool venues to watch Oregon play in, but you kind of knew what was going to happen, even though Wisconsin, certainly gave them a test. This is one that we didn't see coming. It's, it does have some intrigue in that, you don't know how they match up as well. Yes, I would have liked to have seen the Oregon-Ohio State matchup just from the standpoint of, can they do it twice? Could they do it 3 times? But Penn State, all of a sudden now it's all uncertainty like you're describing. And to your point about where the program has come since the Rose Bowl against Penn State, also just getting a matchup against another one of those Big Ten blue bloods in the first year in the Big Ten, kind of getting the full Big Ten experience, it feels like that's part of it too. So I think the Ducks are kind of rolling right now. I think offensively, Dylan Gabriel is absolutely dialed in. He's got a healthy set of receivers. I don't really Jordan James and Noah Whittington are just absolutely, trucking dudes. I feel like offensively, I've got full confidence in the Ducks offense to move the ball and score, and this defense has been as dialed in as anybody in the country. So I guess I'm just not seeing Penn State as a real threat to derail the perfect season. That doesn't mean that something couldn't go wrong in the playoff or in the Rose Bowl. Of course it could, but this matchup doesn't scare me for the Ducks.
Interesting. We're talking with Bill Oram, columnist at The Oregonian, like our sponsor, also born at the beach, and you can go give him a follow on Twitter at Bill Oram. I'm sure you made a lot of Beaver fans happy with the column a couple weeks ago that they need to move on from Oregon and make Washington State their permanent rival in the aftermath of that game. It feels like looking at Oregon State, it's almost a tale of three different seasons. They get off to the 4-1 start. The only loss in there being to Oregon. It's like, hey, this could be a pretty good year, and then just disappear with a couple of ass kickings in the middle. And then they come out from the ashes and they beat Washington State, and they were competitive Friday on the road in Boise on Black Friday. 5-7 now, the closing book for Trent Bray in year one. Kind of explain your thoughts on the rivalry and how they should view that, and what do you make of Trent Bray in year one in Corvallis?
I think it's a big question mark on Trent Bray. I don't know that we learned a ton about him as a coach in the first year. Obviously he kind of had to scramble to build a roster and a coaching staff. Not a position he was expecting to necessarily be in, and all of a sudden it's bam, all of a sudden he's the guy managing the transfer portal. So I am curious to see how he navigates, his first kind of full off season with preparation and building a roster. I do not think that this was a very good Oregon State team. The roster had tons of holes. There were certainly injuries on the defensive side of the ball, but offensively, outside of Jam Griffin, the offense wasn't as banged up as people would have you believe. So, I saw this Oregon State team kind of probably as like a 6-win team, 6, maybe 7. Mm-hmm. I was never buying the 8-9, run the table CFP because it was an easy schedule type of narrative out there. I just didn't think they had the talent. They were kind of in the mix for a bowl game, which is probably where they should have been. They left wins on the table. The one thing that kind of struck me, and people think I've been accused of ganging up on Trent Bray over the last couple of weeks. But, one thing that did strike me is if you can play that well against Washington State, and they did, they played really well against Washington State, and they showed a ton of fight and heart and, were competitive against Boise State, like you said. It does make me wonder where that was for the 5 weeks when they actually had winnable games. Air Force was an all-time letdown. Air Force was the kind of game that gets coaches fired. Mm-hmm. If you're not a first-year coach, that's the kind of game that gets you fired. San Jose State, where was that against San Jose State? Cal, another absolute just, meltdown. And then
Nevada, the other one in there.
The Nevada being the other horrible loss there. Yep. You win 1 or 2 of those, but where was that? What we saw at the end of the year, in the middle of the season, and it makes me feel like Oregon State fans are we've had such a bad run of luck, and everybody left us and we're victims. Well, that doesn't explain why you were so bad in the middle of the season and good at the end of the season. So I do think that is a reflection on the coaching staff and the preparation and the execution in those matchups. Not fatal, but something to keep an eye on. And as far as the rivalry, I just think that this Washington State game is going to continue to pick up juice. The last several matchups have been really compelling, especially the last 2. I think that Oregon State, Washington State are going to be recruiting mostly on the same level. I think the gap between the haves and the have-nots in college football is only going to grow. Not just as Oregon has this run of success and, the NIL money, but the House settlement. If Oregon's able to fund it $22 million a year and Oregon State is, able to fund it at a, portion of that, Oregon is just going to become an even bigger and bigger behemoth in college football. And it's not even a criticism of Oregon State that they can't keep up with that. And so a more realistic and a more rewarding rival for them really is Washington State. And I grew up in the Oregon State rivalry as much as anyone. I have very strong feelings about it. I have a lot of heartache over where things sit and the fact that it has ended. But, sitting there in the press box 2 weeks ago and watching a really terrific Oregon State-Washington State game come down to the wire, seeing those two fan bases, Crimson mixed in with Orange, and it felt like a rivalry game. It was late November, and I was like, you know what? I think it's more fun to get into this than to pin your hopes and your season on a week 3 matchup with a team that is just funded on and playing on a completely different level.
I understand, Bill, that financially their hands are tied a little bit here, but like how pivotal is year 2 in terms of, I guess I don't know what the steps would be per se, but pivotal for Trent Bray and the administration to say, if certain things are not clearly taking the steps, you don't want to let this kind of build the wrong way. So, like, how pivotal is year 2 for you? Is that like Bray maybe coaching for some stuff going forward from there?
Is it a make or Bray season, you mean?
Yeah. Oh, look at him.
Well done.
Well done.
8:15
a.m.
That's my guy. Cup of coffee down, guys. It's a really interesting question and one I've been considering, because I do think, in one sense, Oregon State just has to get to 2026 when the conference is in place and you have like some guardrails and a structure within to work. You have a schedule. I mean, you look at next year's schedule; it looks like it was generated by a bot. You've got Lafayette in the middle of the season. You've got Sam Houston State in November. You've got trips to Texas Tech and Tulsa. Like, it is the most random schedule I've ever seen. And like last year, they're like this season that just concluded, I look at that schedule, I'm like, there's wins there. Like, it's easy. There's a really simple path to getting to, bowl eligibility. And bowl eligibility would be progress, right? You're moving it forward. But I also feel like it would be a little bit of false hope, because you look at that schedule, it doesn't really tell you anything. And they're also going to Appalachian State, by the way, which is a scary trip. But So I almost feel like it's going to be another year of being impossible to really get a full picture of what Trent Bray is bringing to the table. I think what he does in the transfer portal is going to be illuminating. But unless things really go off the rails, I think that you've got to let Trent Bray coach this team in the reformed Pac-12 to really get a sense of what he's capable of and what his leadership looks like. But to your point, I mean, if it's 4-8 or 3-9 next year, and you do have kind of the carrot of we're starting next year in the Pac-12, do you pull the plug? I mean, I don't think that is unreasonable, but I think that I think the most likely scenario and the most reasonable expectation would be take positive steps next year, bowl game, get into the Pac-12, a conference where you should be one of the leaders, and go from there.
Yeah, it's a big year for him, no doubt. He is born at the beach, and his name is Bill Oram. At Bill Oram on Twitter. Go give him a follow. He's a columnist at the Oregonian.
Tell him up in the beach or not.
It's close enough. I mean, it's in the ballpark. Yeah. Come on, give
Portland
the guy a break.
First of all, you can check the records. I was born at North Lincoln General Hospital in Lincoln City. So so I think that's only like the crow flies like 3/4 of a mile from the beach. So I'm claiming it.
And mic drop.
And there's a pelican at Lincoln City now. So you were quite literally born at the beach. How about
You're damn
that?
right. They're damn right there is. Bill Oram, we love chatting with you. Thanks as always for getting up early in the morning, and we'll do this again soon.
Okay, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
There you go. Bill Oram, columnist at The Oregonian, the Daily Ticker. As always, brought to you by our good friends at Pelican Brewing Company. This year, give Santa what he wants. Forget the milk. Paris cookies with the Northwest's favorite festive beer. Bad Santa Cascadian Dark Ale.
Asking a class out loud, does anybody want to go to prom with me?
That's a pretty low moment. That's not good.
Is
there anybody here that's looking for a date?
Does anybody want to sleep with me?
I'd guess based on the way his prom date came about, the answer to your question about the dune was
I don't think they made it to the dune.
I don't think they made it to the dune. I think that night was over at the end of the dance, and you have a wonderful time.
I think he was in his bed by 11 o'clock that night.
I would be willing to bet that was probably the case as well.
Writing in his journal, one day I will prove all
one
these
time
people.
at band camp.
Oh, geez.